Hello everybody, good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the inaugural Building Resilient Brand Summit being organized by InMobi. This year, as mobile becomes front and center for consumers, marketeers and brands alike, we are diving deep into discussing and sharing more about thriving in the era of mobile. Now, as we go into this, we are joined by esteemed speakers from Unilever, Google, GroupM, Dentsu, and AppsFlyer to delve into the aspects of building mobile marketing maturity, talking about redefining the role of the CMO and redefining growth for brands in 2021, and ultimately taking advantage of the tailwinds that consumer trends such as video, gaming, and much more are giving us, and ultimately making sure that we are adopting the top marketing trends such as automation in the form of programmatic. So without much ado, I'd request Rishi Bedi, VP and GM, Southeast Asia, Japan, and Korea, to kickstart things.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I am Rishi Bedi and I lead InMobi in Southeast Asia, Japan, and Korea markets. We have a very interesting conversation lined up for you today. With market disruption dramatically shifting long conditioned behavior in just a matter of weeks, mobile has emerged as the anchor that helped individuals stay connected in a new reality. Today I have with me David Porter from Unilever, and we will be discussing how brands should equip themselves for this radical change in behavior. Hi David, how are you doing?
I'm well, and hi Richie, and thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you. We're delighted to have you with us, David, today. David, I have, of course, a few questions for you. The first question is around the consumer behavior that has rapidly shifted in the last few months. It has led to a lot of uncertainty in the CMO's office. The consumer's point of sales have shifted. They're no longer where they used to be. And marketers have had to really re-strategize their strategies in the last 1 year. We wanted to understand from you, what are some new normal consumer trends that are here to stay?
So, there has been a lot of change. I wouldn't necessarily call it uncertainty, but I think this is well known. We've seen this massive acceleration of people's digital behaviors and a massive acceleration in brands' digital marketing efforts. And so things that we thought would take us maybe 4 or 5 years have happened in a matter of months. And it's going to be very interesting to see which of those habits stick and which slide back into old ways of life. Well, one thing, Richie, I found, and I'm sure you have as well, as you tour the region virtually, that this is not a level playing field across Southeast Asia. Things are happening very differently in different markets. That old saw that we keep on hearing now about same storm, different boats. So it's been wildly varied depending on the public health situation and depending on people's ingrained habits. But this has always been a strong part of the world for mobile. We've been mobile first as a marketing organization in Asia for many years now. So that wasn't a huge pivot for us. I think obviously some of these new habits get really interesting if we look at the extent to which e-commerce and e-medicine, e-learning has really come into play. I've seen all three at play in this room with my son working next to me. Visit your doctor online, and obviously we've all been working from home. And I think a lot of those habits are likely to stay with us. The other thing we've noticed a great deal, certainly here in Singapore, and I'm sure it's true in some other markets where there wasn't total lockdown, is personal fitness has become a major item. And I think that will continue. And of course, that tends to be very app-based these days. So the fitness, the personal fitness bully in the form of an app is here for all of us. I think healthy eating goes hand in glove with that as well. So many new habits in the food category, particularly as many of our markets have a strongly ingrained habit of eating away from home, and that's really shifted much more than it might say in the West. And then, of course, the hygiene habit. This is one that's very close to my heart and Unilever's heart, where we've been working really hard to, particularly on behalf of Lifebuoy, but across the category, to reinstill the habit of frequent, correct hand washing, because it's such an important part of avoiding the pandemic. And it's something that we feel our brand should really be doing. So that's been big. I think the other thing that's changed is the public's appetite, or not, for the kind of messages that some brands are used to putting out. And the need to be utterly authentic, especially in really difficult times, is greatly magnified compared to how it was a few years ago. Now, we've always believed in authenticity in the way we communicate, but now it's become more than kind of a little bit extra. It's become an absolute hygiene factor. Otherwise, the public turns off. So we're looking very hard these days at our purpose on the brands, and the way we break it down is between brand say, what we stand for, and brand do. And we think brand do, the actions that brands actually take rather than just talking about it, will become a bigger and bigger part of a brand's power, its equity, and bigger part of our messaging. And part of that authenticity, for us at least, is around unstereotyping. And you may be aware of the Unstereotype Alliance, which we kicked off with the WFA at Cannes a few years ago. And that's something that we've really doubled down on. So we don't just want to have unstereotyped images from our brands on your screen, but we want the people behind the camera to also be reflective of the real world, and the people writing the briefs to be equally reflective. So that's gone from how you cast a commercial to a full-on diversity and inclusion program in the business. Long answer, short question.
No, those are some great insights, David. Thank you. I think you've given us good insights. A couple of things that stood out for me is, of course, e-commerce and e-learning. So the entire need for being connected with the consumers through the e or digital means, and in that categorically, mobiles has gone up significantly. And there's no past, there's no precedence to this, right? This is the first time the adoption of mobile and online services has shot up so high, so much more. I think there are studies that confirm that 30% of the digital consumers connected with a service for the first time. The adoption of, let's say, e-commerce apps and grocery apps, edutech, all of them has been year on year in the range of some 40 to 60%, depending on which market are we talking to. Now, in that, of course, the last year's pandemic or continued pandemic has played a very important role in pushing digital adoption transformation. I wanted to understand, with all of this going on, with government wanting to connect with consumers on mobile apps by tracing their location, e-commerce or grocery providers wanting to use mobile apps to deliver their daily essentials to consumers in their houses, education platforms doing the same, video or OTT platforms doing the same. I wanted to understand, what do you think is a brand's, what should be a brand's future strategy for building or connecting with the consumers through mobile apps, and how important it is in the scheme of things for this year?
Great question. And I think a few years ago, a lot of brands felt the way to deal with this growing space was to build their own app, period. And I've lost count of the millions that brands around the world have wasted thinking that's the only answer, and then not understanding why millions of subscribers didn't emerge. So I think it's not about necessarily having your own. A lot of those turned out to be vanity projects. It's just about navigating the app-based world and taking it as seriously as we do the open web and the walled gardens as well. So it's become a really important space to play in. I think more and more we're going to see some of the partners like yourselves and some of our DSPs able to operate programmatically across this space and across things like gaming and voice as well. And as these parts of the digital ecosystem get knitted into that way of doing business, I think there will be a really burgeoning area. So, there's still a lot of work to be done in certain areas. It has particular technical challenges, which you know far better than I do. to bring it into that sort of one reach curve. But it's going to be important. And I see programmatic as the way that we can make this less labor intensive and affordable and accountable. So I'm looking forward to doing more work in that space for sure.
Absolutely, David. One more follow-up question on the same point, David. Of course, we've seen in the last few years, as you mentioned, tons and tons of brands wanting to have their own app, having an app, and not necessarily seeing a huge growth or execution in terms of engagement or driving that brand purpose or the strategy going through the app. But of course, things changed last year and still are changing. How do brands who do not own an app today straddle this development?
As I said, I think there are plenty of other areas out there to navigate. I'd almost turn it around and say, if we're going to build apps these days, we're asking far more sensible questions of ourselves rather than just rushing off and doing it. So, for example, having a stronger online presence as a brand on your own, in your own territory, got a whole lot more important as the need to create our own first-party data became more important. And we've started to build the value of those data into our cost equation when we look at whether or not it's worth building a brand's own or a standalone app or whatever it may be. So you're right that the cost equation has certainly changed and people are a lot more thoughtful about it. And that's probably the biggest single benefit for many packaged goods brands, is that if we're in that environment and in control of the data value exchange with the public and building healthy, useful relationships on both sides of that through first party, then it starts to get interesting. And I think that's why you've seen a lot of brands start to move towards being able to trade direct with the public online, for example. But whether that's through an app or through the open web, it's not something that keeps me awake at night, to be quite entirely honest.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we also seen a lot of development in the direct-to-consumer space across the region. And yeah, some of that is yet to be seen, and we will see as it unfolds. Is it web or is it app? But we definitely know that the first point of engagement, the awareness, the consideration definitely is appearing to be like more on the mobile side, and from there on the journey travels towards an M-web platform or a web platform or an app platform. And where do we see real growth is, we would learn as we go this year. All right, David, we'll move on to the next question. So we've heard about digital marketing maturity in 2021, and that's the after effect of the pandemic. And we believe, because we look at the mobile growth, as we've discussed in the last few minutes, we believe that digital marketing maturity is in some ways for Southeast Asia or APAC region almost the same as mobile marketing maturity. So they're very overlapping and similar for us in this region, because we are mobile first, mobile dominant, most of the population, consumers here. In terms of that mobile marketing maturity, what do you think brand needs to build in terms of programmatic maturity, in terms of mobile video or leveraging video on mobile, in terms of consumer intelligence or solutions built around it? On these three vectors, what would you suggest for brands to invest their time and effort on?
So I think the first thing is that mobile first has to mean mobile first. And we actually have to walk the talk. So that took not very long to get into media planners' brains. It took us a little longer, I think, as an industry to really start thinking about how to build assets and creative work for the device rather than just editing work we'd done before. But I got so used, I think, to complaining about the lack of progress there that I probably didn't recognize enough just how much progress has been made in the last few years. And I think it's been terrific. So I think creatively, we're much closer to having assets that reflect the very different nature of the device that they're viewed on. So that's the first thing. The thing I'm always alert to in this space is the disruptors, because the change they can bring is so fundamental. And I'm thinking about two comparatively recent events. If we go back a couple of years to what Jio did in terms of turning Indian Mobile experience is upside down to the point where now Indians consume more mobile data than USA and China combined, I think. Or certainly did just before the pandemic. That was a complete, absolute disruptor. And then we have, of course, other occasions more recently where perhaps there's an unintended consequence in the Philippines where basically the nation pivoted to digital when one of the networks went off out. So those disruptors, when they come, really do change things incredibly quickly. And it's not always possible to predict what the unintended consequences of those things will be. But we need to keep across it. And I'm sure we're going to see a few more as we come out of the pandemic with much more mobile-centric public and governments being aware of the opportunities that they now face them. I think the other challenge we've got in this world where one has to be that much more authentic in the messaging is the money that we used to spend building brand love or brand power now has to do a whole lot of other jobs as well, like drive purpose, both in say and do, like help us with our data acquisition that we just touched on slightly, and also to drive performance in e-commerce or bricks and mortar retail. So we're really having to, I think, ask ourselves how to make sure that the same money can cover all of that, with particular attention to the mobile world. The other sort of vector I'd want to bring into this, I think, is just health and safety, if you like. That we really need to keep pushing for a healthier, safer digital ecosystem, and I appreciate Mobi is a great supporter of this idea. But we know that bad actors love new platforms. So when we're living in this incredibly exciting moment when so much new stuff's happening, we also know that the bad actors are there at the same time or even before many of us. So although we've made great progress on viewability and other accountability, brand safety, this game's never over. And I think we really appreciate the industry coming together now through GARM, through the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, because this is the first time we've got the big platforms, the major agency groups, and the world's largest brands working together to make this happen. And I think last year was a year of getting organized, talking, trying to get this common vocabulary even across that whole piece so that we all agreed what safety was, what viewability was, etc. This year, I hope, will be the year of taking proper action and really being fully aligned on how we make the internet safer, more accountable, and better for the general public. And I would say that's most important for mobile, because this is the device that all too often parents will hand off to their children as a pacifier without necessarily understanding the experience that's then going to be had by that child. So I think particularly for brand safety, it's going to be a hot topic. And we've talked, of course, about diversity and inclusion earlier on. So I think for digital maturity, delivering a consumer experience on mobile that looks a whole lot more like the places where the viewer lives, and a whole lot less like the sort of stereotypical advertising world of yore. I think that's going to be a real step forward. I'm looking forward to seeing the benefits of that as well.
Sure. Absolutely. I think that point that you made about kids having access to this device, which was not the case with other devices like a PC or a laptop, it's a very important point. And health, safety of the brand, of privacy, security of data, I think all of that presents a very different opportunity as well as a challenge in order to think from a mobile first approach. It's not solution built for one screen or one device may not fit exactly well on mobile, and that's why investing more effort and time on mobile and building some of these capabilities very carefully is very, very important.
And Rishi, this, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. This is the price we pay for having a device which is so uniquely personal and intimate in the way that we use them as consumers. We keep our privacy is on there. The things we hold most dear are often on there, whether that's your family or your finances or whatever it may be. And if we're going to be welcomed into that space, I've always felt that mobile deserves or needs a slightly different level of thought and consideration about how we use that moment when we do actually get a member of the public's attention. But because it's so intimate, if you get it right, the rewards are immense. So it's a challenge worth facing up to, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that's going to make it difficult, of course, is we're trying to do this in a continuing pandemic. And I think it's all too easy for many of us to forget that while that pandemic's raging, there's a global recession kind of bubbling away underneath it. So it's going to be a rocky couple of years. But I think in terms of where the public's got to, mobile's going to play a huge, huge part in global recovery and how we communicate in future.
Last question from my side, David. We want to know a little bit more, if you're comfortable sharing, without going into too much detail. We want to know only what you can share comfortably. Is what has been Unilever's approach, either in terms of technology or otherwise, to build mobile marketing maturity? If you can share some anecdotal examples or some insights, I think that would be great and useful for all of us.
Yeah, so there's an area I can't really talk too much around things like how we work our production, supply chain, warehousing, and so forth. But we're certainly taking digitization generally very seriously, and not just as a thing that's done in marketing. I mean, our Chief Digital and Marketing Officer, Connie Brahms, it's the "and" in her title is an important one. It's digital and marketing. So that they're seen as two things that sit side by side. So that distinction is fully recognized in the business. I think in terms of mobile and the media work we've done, it's just been more of the same, but doing it faster and really making sure that the creative product now keeps up with the technology that we've got available to us. And I think you will see a lot more in gaming coming through, particularly in the mainstream area. I'm really interested in gaming at the moment and how you've got this incredibly organized esports system in the West in terms of teams, but incredibly popular esports from the East, particularly from Tencent in China. And then in the middle, when those two things converge, that's going to be huge. And we've also got a massive mainstream gaming that is barely recognized by marketers yet as being a huge opportunity with mass audiences. And of course, something that's quite special in Southeast Asia, which we're going to have to learn about here, is as we see e-commerce, the gradual sinification of Southeast Asian e-commerce as the Chinese platforms really build, and the gamification on the festival days that comes with that is a whole new space as well that you don't see on Western platforms, and therefore global brands based in the West don't have a huge amount of experience in. So I think that's going to be a hot learning area for us in mobile in the year ahead, because the next 11.11 will be very much an entertainment and gaming experience, I think, as it is these days in China. So that would be one of the big areas, I think, to watch.
Okay, fantastic. I think it's interesting that the way gaming has also shot up in the last 1 year, and enough and more reports now tell us how many women are on gaming in various countries. And the top 3 or 4 segments or audience segments on the gaming, these are not esports, but it's very encouraging to see how much higher share of both genders is now on mobile. There's a fair amount of good proportion, and I think 50 to 60% plus women now play gaming. Of course, these are casual games, but of course, it wasn't the case a few years ago, which is very encouraging.
Yeah, I agree. And so I do think brands will really start to step into that space. It's got a little bit of work to do in terms of organization, so that we know that we can talk to 3 or 4 operations in broadly similar ways, and then brands can learn how to really structure and manage their campaigns. But again, it comes back to programmatic and being able to do this at scale. That's going to attract many more brands than perhaps more niche brands which have traditionally been involved in esports. This is going to open it up. So looking forward to that, and it's going to be a great year ahead, full of challenges, everything being done twice as fast as it was the year before. But I think we're getting used to that, and it's part of the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. I'm going to try and give a 2-minute summary of our discussion, and it'll be great if you can add anything else after that. So, in short, I think great insights. Southeast Asia and APAC are mobile first, and mobile first means mobile first. That means every strategy, every execution, every thought, every purpose should take mobile into consideration. These examples to do that are think about assets, for example. Make sure assets derive the maximum value of the screen or platform that we are leveraging. So if you're thinking mobile, then your assets should be mobilized for distribution, for engagement on mobile. Another one is, of course, leveraging a lot of data for making sure that we are able to engage with the consumers that we want to build efficiencies. If there is e-commerce strategies around data, there is a lot of data on gaming. There's if you have a direct engagement, it doesn't matter it's around the app or the web, but you start from data and of course engage with consumers with the thriving mobile app in assets or inventory available across the region. Another one is health and safety of the brand. So safety of not just the brand but also the privacy. All of that comes with a lot of responsibility. If you've already got strategies and policies and some guidelines in the organization, revisit them and think how they are customized for a mobile first approach in the region. All in all, we are a mobile first region, and it's important for all of us to think and put mobile first when we are planning our marketing strategies this year. And the pandemic has actually elevated that need and responsibility much more. So that's in short. David, if anything else you would want to add to that, please do.
I think it's the classic, what he said. Fully agree. And I think, I find a bigger and bigger part of my role is to make sure that we are working with other brands in other parts of the world through the World Federation of Advertisers to make sure this whole safety and accountability piece is dealt with, because it is an industry issue. These aren't areas where you can win against your competitors. It's about working together. So I think that collaboration is going to be very important, and it's great to have partners like InMobi at GARM to make that happen. So fully agree. Looking forward to the year ahead and the year in mobile.
Thank you so much, David. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, and thank you for taking out time to join us today and share those brilliant insights.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for this session. My name is Vasudha Agarwal and I head the Asia Pacific business for InMobi. We are here today to discuss one of the most critical topics in the advertising industry, programmatic and its role in the ecosystem. Programmatic advertising has witnessed an exponential rise, claiming an estimated 72% of all digital spends by the year 2021. And Asia Pacific, and more specifically Southeast Asia, have been a critical factor in fueling this growth. Today, I'm joined by two experts who have been in the driver's seat when it comes to this transformation in the region. John Miskelly, who is the APAC Investment Director at Group M, and Sunil Narayani, who is the VP for Commercials and Partnerships in APAC at Dentsu. Welcome, John. Welcome, Sunil. It's great to have you here today, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Likewise, Vasudha. Thanks for having us.
So, John and Sunil, let's dive straight in. We'll go through a couple of questions today to get your thoughts about the shift in the programmatic ecosystem and how Asia Pacific and specifically Southeast Asia are fueling this change. So let's start with the first one, right? Let's talk about the state of programmatic in the region. Of course, Asia Pacific is a complex market, and every sub-region or sub-market has their own nuances. So can you talk a little bit about the state of programmatic? Maybe let's start with you, Sunil, on the state of programmatic across the region.
Sure, thanks, Vasudha. I think great question. Programmatic has been at the forefront of digital for quite a few years now. I think the future state is definitely of growth. It is getting fueled a lot around the consumer shift into the digital world, and I think the immense amount of video consumption is driving that fact as well. APAC, quite a complicated region, frankly. All markets are at different stage of maturity, is what I would say. I think if you look at the likes of China, massively penetrated on digital and then quite at the forefront. A lot of the OTT or mobile consumption is taking place there, which is powering a lot of programmatic. Similarly, for the likes of, I would say, India and Indonesia, which are again quite mobile first, or sometimes mobile commerce first. So again, the amount of consumption on OTT, which is purely a smartphone phenomena, is pushing the growth for programmatic. If I look at few other markets, let's say Australia, again a very sophisticated digital market, you would say that while OTT similarities exist, it is a lot powered around CTV with lines kind of blurring or will soon blur between linear TV and BVOD that we see. So the likes of channel 7, 9, and 10 pushing out and doing quite a few sophisticated things with their own first party and ad tech stack in terms of allowing marketers to have much more better information available around audiences and context of programming in the bit stream for marketers to kind of buy. I think I've kind of covered all markets essentially, but the likes of video and smartphone or mobile is kind of powering the growth of programmatic.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that. And John, would love to understand, would you like to add anything to that, especially, which markets do you think in Asia Pacific are uniquely, positioned to adopt programmatic, and which markets are you seeing this growth in more vis-a-vis others?
Yeah, thanks, Priscilla. Very similar to what Sunil said. You have China out there at around programmatic's driven a lot by what the digital adoption is. We have China out there at around 90% digital. You've got, I guess, next level down. You have Australia and some of the North Asian markets, and like Taiwan, South Korea, Japan. They're high digital markets. And then you will have some of the SEA markets, which are still quite low in terms of digital. So that's how we would probably rank it in terms of sophistication and programmatic. I think Australia is probably one of the most sophisticated, as Neil said, huge amount of in programmatic inventory being sort of executed via connected television. And probably the one that I find quite exciting. I think Indonesia is a particularly exciting market in terms of the sheer level of OTT out there, and quite a lot of that inventory being transacted in a programmatic fashion, not many direct items being done there.
Okay. And given that, each of these markets is at a different stage of evolution, there is also, like you mentioned, a lot of trends around OTT, CTV, mobiles powering a lot of that, growth on programmatic. Do you still sense some, hesitation or barriers to adoption when it comes to programmatic? And how can we overcome some of those? What has been your experience of addressing some of these concerns, whether it is from advertisers or trading desks themselves? What are some of the barriers that you see?
Yeah, I think there's still quite a degree of skepticism from clients about the execution of programmatic. I think everyone will have seen the ISBA report that was done in the UK this year about supply path transparency. So I think for some clients, there's still a degree of, what does this do for me? How are people making money? And in the middle, is it adding to my business? And I think on the agency side, it's called programmatic, but still a lot of it's quite manual. There's still a lot of manual processes, a lot of manual reporting done, which can make it quite tricky to scale it in some markets. So I think some of the barriers are the cynicism on the client end and the agency end, trying to find ways in which it can be automated in a more processed manner.
Got it. And Sunil, anything that you guys are also doing to sort of overcome some of this, skepticism, this hesitation that John referred to? Are there, say, automation or tools that the agency and trading desk teams are thinking through that could help overcome these barriers?
Sure. So I think the clients are, I think, number one to what John mentioned is are concerned about transparency, is that, the amount of dollars they're putting into advertising, how much of that is really being utilized for their working media. I think all of them want to maximize that. So that's the number one concern. We're doing quite a bit in that front. Everything around supply path optimization now becomes the centerpiece, alongside everything that we've been doing so far around being as smart and as using the different ML and AI algorithms to optimize media on the DSP. I think the number one change is we have to see that the supply is going hand in hand with everything that we're doing around the DSP. So, I mean, we've launched a few proprietary products, largely aligning with the largest SSPs and publishers, such that the chain is more transparent. Clients can be, asking the right questions and then hold each of these different stakeholders accountable at the, different fronts. So that's number one. I think the other thing that we are generally seeing around programmatic is how's it faring compared to other digital media in terms of efficiency and ROI. I think that becomes the other factor in choosing where to spend your money. So again, I mean, if you talk about wall gardens, let's say a Facebook or a Google in their owned and operated properties, there's a complete visibility of that supply and the final buy point, right? Hence, the same currency or the same media metric can be planned for and bought for at the same instance. But I think with programmatic, it's quite complicated. There are a few fragmented pieces, and hence sometimes your planning currency may not always follow your buying currency. So those are the things that we kind of bridge through by having the better alignment across the programmatic partners. And then I think the other thing which our industry is kind of grappling with all the changes happening around, let's say, cookies, or what you want to do with addressability and identity, again, poses more questions and more questions to the advertisers or the brands who then need answers from agencies like ourselves around, number one, being educated on what should they do, and second, most importantly, what is the impact on their current advertising. So I think it's a lot more education that we are taking in terms of telling the clients, this is the change, this is the impact to your business, and here are the couple of solutions that we could as an agency put forward immediately to ensure that the gaps are minimized and the businesses BAU or finding a way for growth. So I would say those are the three areas in which we are seeing questions from advertisers around the skepticism from on programmatic per se.
Understood. And you touched upon some of these important topics around supply path optimization that John talked about. You also mentioned the point around identity, and especially I think with the changes that Apple is bringing in with IDFA, the deprecation of third-party cookies that we expect next year. John, would love to understand if there is any thoughts on this whole identity solution, and what role do you see these playing in the programmatic ecosystem, say in the next few years?
Yeah, there's a lot of changes when it comes to this. I think like the thing that we're focusing on is we think that household identity is the next level of density. We focus a lot on trying to build a household graph for some of our proprietary media products. We think that is a fight that treads the line between high levels of targeting and efficiency, but also overcoming some of the privacy issues and targeting individuals that are happening in a lot of markets. So I think you'll find a lot of people will sort of switch towards this household addressability targeting, and that'll be one of the next big key things in programmatic.
Understand. And do you see, I mean, Southeast Asia being ahead behind some of this? Because we're all aware that, Southeast Asia specifically is an Android heavy market, right? So some of the IDFA changes may not impact here as much, but I'm sure the deprecation of third-party cookies would be a big impact. So do you see like Southeast Asia specifically being, far behind, or, given how the market has evolved, it's sort of catching up soon?
I think it's probably slightly a bit further behind when it comes to some of the publishers and broadcasters capturing first-party data. So, like we mostly both talked about Australia being a highly sophisticated market when it comes to television, and I think something very progressive the broadcasters have done in those markets are capturing, the login details and subscription details of the users, and being able advertisers to target those ways in a privacy compliant way that allows that sort of high level of targeting that you would get via like Google or Facebook. I see probably that hasn't been rolled out in a lot of the SAA markets. So when you go to talk to a broadcaster, you're really only talking about infantry. So I think that's probably one of the things that they'll have to get on in the next couple of years, is especially when you've got people like Google and Facebook who've got, huge amounts of first-party data and being able, deterministic data. I think you'll find the broadcasters and publishers will have to get on a little bit in that space and develop their chops in that space.
Got it. And identity solutions, obviously, as these come up, they will require a lot of, I would say, coordination and work between obviously advertisers, their own first party, user stores. I think agencies play a big role because you work so closely with, your advertisers. And then, of course, DSPs and DMPs and so on, which are the third party tech stacks coming into the mix. How do you see that shaping up? Do you think there are enough such partners in Asia Pacific? Because one thing I hear continuously is, there is a dearth of reliable third party data which really covers all the markets. Maybe Sunil, you could share your view there, and then John, if you have more to add on that.
Sure. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, generally, what I keep telling everybody is that the amount of effort we got to put in Asia Pacific is probably 3 times or 4 times more than you would put in any other region. Given you have to get alignment of so many different markets, then there's a local nuance, and then again, there's this education piece that you spend typically, 1/3 of your time. From the point of identity solutions, I do think that's going to be the way forward in some shape and form, because the industry will find a solution now or soon. But generally, there are just 2 ways to go about this. We feel that everything in like digital advertising is now going to get contextual, and you don't want to rely on the consumer and then have them choose for their own consent of opt-in. That's one way of going with it, and of course, I mean, it is possible, but sometimes contextual done right does sometimes lack scale, and it needs to be kind of in some way widened up. So identity then becomes the other option, and we are chatting to quite a few providers, all of them trying to, I would say, do their best. I mean, let's say there is Trade Desk Unified ID 2.0, there is Lotomaze Panorama ID, New Stars launched their own ID. ID5 is doing a lot with publishers around the first party. But again, I think Southeast Asia, specifically to your point, I think is still a mixed bag. We see some publishers taking full charge of the tech stack, talking a very sophisticated language around logins, what they are kind of collecting as first party, what they want to make available, but they don't really have a plan. They don't know how to value CPM or monetize that from a publisher monetization language standpoint. But I think from a marketer, it's a fabulous region. Southeast Asia, probably the most exciting region, because mobile smartphone become the common currency if you have your mobile strategy right. Essentially, you're going to have a device strategy to start with. So I do think addressability is possible quite fast. We've seen Southeast Asia again take a leap forward, where I kind of mentioned that while everybody was looking at a mobile first strategy, many markets are already on a mobile commerce first strategy, so they've kind of skipped a level altogether there. So there's a lot of things to learn from other sophisticated markets, which are kind of more homogeneous. Let's say like Australia or America in that sense, while Southeast Asia is not. But we will find a common thread, and what we are, our key message to all the ID providers is while we will test it out, we hope that all the different stakeholders can collaborate and come to that one single interoperable kind of a solution. Otherwise, we're just going to be looking at the industry again in a fragmented manner.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think that's possibly, the aspiration all of us would have for the region, right? For us to get to that a single currency of measurement in the new post IDFA, post cookie world. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Switching gears a little bit from the identity side, and John, this is to you. In the last 12 months, obviously, we would have seen that marketing objectives have become more and more, performance focused. There's a lot of focus on ROI. Obviously, I mean, everyone's very conscious about their marketing spend. So given this whole change, what role have you seen programmatic play? Is it helping with these marketer objectives? Are there still barriers to programmatic when it comes to very performance and ROI driven goals?
Yeah, like it's programmatic's played a different role, I guess, over the last year, given what's happened in the world. So I'll try and give you a couple of examples. I think in some sectors like quick service restaurants, we've seen the shift from linear television to what you might programmatic slash addressable. So some examples would be in Australia, we've seen a lot of the quick service restaurants that are really accelerate their home delivery service because all of their stores obviously had to be shut down. So what we found was that those types of advertisers had to really focus on location, addressability to help promote some of their fast food services or home delivery services, rather than what they'd historically done on a blanket television. So that's a really nice example, I think, in a particular sector. And also we found a lot, like you see a lot of companies that have accelerated their e-commerce strategies. What was a 3-year plan turned into a 3-month plan. So I think that programmatic, a lot of clients have actually shifted their budget into programmatic for that really finite level of targeting that could be done on programmatic, rather than some of the mass media channels that they'd previously used, like television, outdoor, and print. So I think that those are the two big things that I've seen over the last year that's happened in terms of clients shifting their budget to programmatic.
Understood. So, and of course, you think that, I mean, going forward, is there, some innovations? We talked about a lot of trends today. We talked about OTT, we talked about identity, we've talked now about, e-commerce and m-commerce. Are there any other trends, say, in the next 2 to 3 years, which you think will be important ones when it comes to programmatic? Globally, of course, but specifically in Asia Pacific, given it's a mobile first market.
There's lots of little things, lots of little noise, but I think addressability and e-commerce, those are the two things that we're really doubling down on. There are other little things that are happening, but I think for us, those are the two big focuses when it comes to programmatic.
Okay, addressability and e-commerce. Got it. And Sunil, from your side, what do you think could be the big innovations or trends in the next few years? We didn't talk too much. I mean, we touched upon OTT and video, but do you think there's anything on the format side, even beyond video, which could be exciting or interesting?
Not really, I guess, directly associated to programmatic, but we've been working with quite a few really smart partners that, help ease out the creative creation workflow, and they make it very, I would say, experiential and very immersive. So those things are going to be, again, available in the, we call it a standard 300 by 250 unit very, very soon. So that kind of adds on to the dimension of what programmatic advertising can deliver and brings the creative side of things. I think John, very well touched upon e-commerce, quite important because every brand is having more like a DTC strategy where they're trying to balance 3 things, right? Number one, which is their own brand.com. Is it Shopify or not? What's their marketplace, strategy? I mean, is it, like an e-commerce market that you want to spend on and calculate what the ROI or a GMV is? And then the third is what you're doing on your own paid media and trying to optimize the 3 to see what's your overall ROAS. So that's important. But I'll also like to add on gaming, because that's growing quite a bit again for APAC. It's still in the infancy. I mean, if you look at the consumption of gaming, it's probably much higher when you look at the amount of the inventory that's actually being monetized. So there's a gap if you look at the 2 worms around, the consumption versus the monetization. Those worms will come closer, and we will have a more, I would say, mature play on gaming, which is either number one, have better insights for gaming, and you move kind of upstream for brands that want more, I guess, integrated and more strategic pieces where they might want to, integrate with 1 or 2 game titles and play some kind of an in-game strategy. So I would just throw in gaming in addition to probably what we would see as the next big thing alongside everything around supply curation, which, kind of goes back to your previous question on performance, because you have to have a common currency of planning and buying, and it can't be fragmented anymore.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting one, Sunil, the gaming point that you bring up, because I think from some of the data that's been coming out, I think across APAC, I mean, there were some markets which were always very dominant on gaming, but I think especially, Southeast Asia and India, the number of gamers coming out of these regions has really exploded in the last sort of 12 to 14 months. So definitely, I think look forward to, what that could bring for us, especially in terms of creative innovation as well. I think before wrapping up, I think the last question for both of you, and John, we'll start the last question with you, is for all the marketeers and buying heads and leads, everyone listening in today. What would be your, say, top 2 or 3 tips or suggestions to them on how to approach programmatic advertising, right? Especially in this region.
So I always say that there's sort of 4 buckets to programmatic. There is the supply that you get, there is your data strategy, the technology that stitches it all together, and the people that execute those buys. I think over the last sort of 5 years, all the focus has been very much on data and technology, and supply and people are kind of the 2 things that potentially don't get the attention that they deserve. So to try and get really practical examples, people like know your trader, know the person that is in platform pushing buttons, hands on keyboards. There's nothing quite like a trader flashing up their programmatic dashboard to a client and walking through how they execute it. I think you'll find that it's a really good experience for clients and advertisers just to see what's happening in the background and the sheer amount of work that goes on and how much work does go into programmatic. There isn't some magic button that says optimize and people kick back and that's their job done. There's a lot of work done. I think supply is really important. And like as part of our SBO strategy last year, we noticed that we were executing really, really sophisticated data strategies, but we were domains, with a lot of domains that we spend across. So I think supply, like knowing where your supply goes, is a really important one, and we're ensuring to see every domain, where every dollar goes in every domain, to make sure that you're comfortable with where your ad dollars are landing in terms of supply. So those are the 2 practical examples I would give to any marketers: know your trader and know where every single impression lands.
Great, thank you. So know your trader and know where your impressions are landing on the supply side. Great. And Sunil, back to you on this one. Any tips, suggestions for all the marketers out there?
I think very difficult question. It generally, I would say number one is it's very important that all marketers have like a firm handle on their own digital readiness. Quite critical because everybody's has to today or tomorrow go through a digital transformation for success. So number one, understand, work with your internal stakeholders or your trusted partners to just plot where you stand in terms of your digital readiness. Most important. I think the second one will be that, do you have a good paid strategy that is working with DTC along with some kind of a brand building. I think that chain is important for marketers to, unlock. And then efficiency, of course, plays a role. You would see due to COVID, a lot of our, marketers have either reduced their marketing budgets or have become more cost conscious. So I think that's the second one that I would put in. And I think point number 3, programmatic is quite complicated. I've been in this era for a long time to say, and then sometimes what meets the eye is absolutely not what it is. So it's kind of the tip of the iceberg. And then what so happens is that with the likes of so much control, automation, and granularity that is now available to us to enhance and optimize campaigns, there's a lot more effort and services that we have to deploy for those campaigns. And sadly, I think, it just is seen as a programmatic line item and gets paid the same kind of fee or commission. So I think that's more like not like a tip really, but probably like a point of view sitting at an agency to say that there's a whole lot more that goes around that. And I think it's important if we look at the scope of works, there's a lot more that we are lifting. So hopefully we can get paid fairly for that. Essentially, it's all towards better marketing. So those would be the 3 things I would say.
Sure. So I think absolutely, guys. I think I'm glad that we could cover some of the important trends and also form a forward-looking view. And I think towards the end, getting some of these tips and suggestions, I'm hoping would be really useful for the audience. So thank you for that. And thank you everyone for joining in today. A big thanks to both John and Sunil for making the time for this. And I hope you find this session useful. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having us, Vasudha. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this session with us. I hope all of you and your loved ones are safe and healthy. So today we are discussing a very, very interesting topic, game on. Phenomena that has captured global mobile population, more so in Southeast Asia, like never before. We all have this feeling that we have mobile gamers all around us, right? They have increased in number disproportionately during this COVID time specifically, and they are across age, gender, demographics. But some of the statistics that we have are truly mind-boggling. So how we're going to spend next 20 to 25 minutes is as following. Firstly, I'm going to share some really astonishing stats with you, which will establish that gaming on mobile has arrived and has arrived as big time. Secondly, we will also have an industry expert with us. We will have Elvin joining us for a chat, sharing his perspective on what is in it for today's marketer. So that side of part is also very, very important for all of us to understand. Elvin heads Google marketing platform, of course, at Google for Indonesia. And lastly, we will wrap it up by discussing key takeaways from our discussion with Elvin. So that's how we will spend the next 25 minutes or so. Without any further ado, let's take our session further with some of those stats. All right, there we are. These are some mind-boggling stats. 250 million gamers around us in Southeast Asia. We all believe that a lot of population is playing games, more so during the COVID times when they had a little more time, to spend through on their mobile phones. But these stats are truly mind-boggling. What this establishes is if you don't have a strategy reaching out to this large population, you must have one, because pretty much everyone is on mobile gaming population. And this phenomena, by the way, is only increasing further. So the number of population who is on mobile games right now, in 6 months down the lane, you never know, it can become 1.5x, 2x. So this phenomena is catching up really, really fast. Moving further, let's deep dive into Indonesia, one of the largest markets that we have in Southeast Asia. We all know that gaming has always been one of the largest, if not the largest, content vertical that is available on mobile phones. If any increase happens on that, that's going to be further mind-boggling. Now, here, what you see here is the increasing number of games played each month by average user, and Indonesia is featuring amongst the top 3 markets across the globe, with again astonishing 26%. So that's a quarter of an increase. Already a lot of people are playing a lot of games. Now there is a further increase that has happened during COVID-19 pandemic times, and you see the peak month in 2020 versus peak month in 2019, the average is further increased. And I very strongly believe that this is going to again increase further up. So a lot of people playing a lot of games is what we have seen in a couple of sites so far. Who are these people who are playing these games? Let's try and understand a bit more by diving deep into the top gaming audiences. If at all you believed that Indonesian gamers were males aged between 16 to 20 or 24, you were absolutely wrong. Now, what the slide tells us is there are 59% female gamer versus 41% male gamer. So there are more females playing mobile games than males. And if you thought for a moment that this phenomena, again, as I said, is more predominant between the age group 18 to 24, again, all of us were absolutely wrong, because what you see here is 45 plus, that is having the most amount of participation in this phenomena. So that's the crux of the chart that you see on the left. The one that you see on the right is also very, very interesting. If you thought for a moment, what is it the type of gaming apps that Indonesian gamers are spending their time on? This is not just made up of one part of or one content category within games. There are multiple content categories within gaming also. So you have got casual games, you've got action games, you've got arcade games. What this gives you is an opportunity to talk to different set of audience within mobile gaming populations as well. So when you think of mobile gamer, just don't think so that he's gonna playing or he would be playing one sort of game within the portfolio of gaming applications that are available on smartphone. There are a number of games capturing different sets of contents within gaming population as well. So as we look at some of the stats on this particular slides, let's look at how the gaming audience engagement through the months have been, and let's compare the before pandemic and after pandemic era. You see there's disproportionate increase in gaming audience engagement that has come in March and April. Now this is the after pandemic time. So now a lot of people playing a lot of games, and the engagement that you have has also increased considerably. And if you thought that growth in gaming app usage was coming in just one category of apps, that is also wrong. You see massive amount of growth coming in arcade games, board games, simulation games, and some of the stats that we saw on the previous slide, looking at the gender demographics, this is mind-boggling. So it's a very interesting space which has picked up the pace like never before. Of course, after pandemic stats are astonishingly exciting for today's marketer. So there's a lot happening in gaming space, and some of these stats just affirms that for us. All right, these were some really interesting stats. Now let's also welcome Elvin and takes his perspective on what all of this phenomena means for today's marketer. So let's welcome Elvin into our session. All right. All right, so here we have Elvin joining us, and I'm really looking forward to spending next few minutes and hearing from him on this topic. Just to reiterate for our viewers, Elvin heads Google marketing platform at Google in Indonesia. Hello, Elvin. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Welcome to our session. How are you doing?
Thanks, Sudhanshu. Thanks for having me here. We're doing great here in Jakarta. Hope all of you in Mobi are doing fine as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Alvin, and really appreciate your time once again. So the very interesting topic that we have is Game On for Southeast Asia. And I look forward to discussing that, given the explosion in mobile gamer populations across the globe, more so in Southeast Asia, and more importantly, what this trend really means for marketers. And Alvin, given you head Google marketing platform for Indonesia, you'll not only have a very comprehensive view of content consumption patterns, trends that are emerging within mobile media, but also deep insights on how the marketers or advertiser community is reacting to it. So let me start by picking upon that part. Now, as we understand, Elvin, that many experts are stating that there are almost 2.7 billion mobile gamers now across the globe. Now, that number is mind-boggling. Just to put things into perspective, that's pretty much 70% of the world's smartphone population. That basically means that gaming has actually come to the forefront of entertainment vertical and has become a sort of mainstream in Southeast Asia. From an advertising lens, Elvin, what do you think is the perception among advertisers regarding the gaming opportunity in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of, and we've heard a lot of requests and questions from advertisers to learn more about gaming. I think the appetites to actually going to be involved in the gaming industry is actually getting there. However, there are a couple of trends or perceptions that we actually kind of observe. I think number one, despite they are actually like really wanted to play in gaming area, however, there are some misconceptions that's quite prominent. There are a couple of aspects. I think the first ones that actually quite prominent that we've seen is actually on the gender. Second one is actually on age, and third one is actually on geo or city. There are many brands, advertisers are still think or assumes that gamings are really mainly for, young males, 10 to 20 years old that actually resides in urban area. However, based on the recent study that we've done, and this is actually also published in our latest Thing with Google article, we found that 40% of the gaming communities are actually female, right? This is actually quite a big chunk of it. And we think that actually this is a big group of audience that brand can also leverage. The second one that we have actually seen as well is actually in terms of locations. Given there are more easy access for data, we've seen there are more audience that actually grow in tier 2 cities as well, not only in urban area. And when you come to think about it, right, you've seen there are many games that actually very localized. I think in Indonesia, there are these games called past simulators that actually still being used and being consumed and being played a lot in our tier 2 cities as well. So I think that's the kind of perceptions that I've seen from the brand advertisers. The second one that we've seen as well is actually, I think gaming is pretty much still in the nascent stage. A lot of brand is actually trying to figure out how's the best to actually play in this new industry, which is actually still which is very reasonable, right? Some of them is actually wanted to play in esports. Some of them is actually get the gaming talents, for instance, or even some create their own gaming experience, right? Despite whatever things that brands things to do, I think it's very important for brand advertisers to actually leverage this momentum very fast, right? Because everybody is actually trying to play this in this area, and given the sheer size of the audience and given the sheer size of gaming games and gaming players out there, I think brand needs to actually try to be there as fast and as soon as possible.
That's very interesting. And given the very large scale of mobile gaming population, as you mentioned, it has broken the myth of having or associate gaming with just a specific demographic. All those myths have really broken. As you mentioned, 40% of all the gaming population that you saw at Google was female. So that's really large. And we just talked about earlier that at InMobi platform, we see more females than male gamers. So that's really interesting. So it's now becoming a medium that you most definitely cannot afford to not participate as far as this trend is concerned. Alvin, what do you think a brand has to do to embrace gaming to its truest potential? Or if I have to flip it, with your experience, what do you think are the top concerns within the in-game advertising for brands that exist today?
Okay, so I think it's a very good question. It's a very tough question as well, because as I mentioned, I think everybody is actually trying to figure it out at this point in time. But I think principally there are three things that I've seen that brands can actually do to actually embrace gaming to its true potentials. I think the number one is actually on ads creative. I think we all agree that creative actually plays a big part on how communications is actually being conveyed and being received by the consumers. So ads creative plays an important role. Right. In our platform itself, YouTube especially, we've have a couple of studies that shows like what kind of creative elements that actually works in a gaming territory. Like for example, I think in gaming ads, music actually trumps words, right? Very important to actually show your game line, right? And how can brands actually bring game into real world? I think this is one of the criteria that we've seen that actually works in ads creative. And I've seen also there are a lot of brands that actually try to gamify their ads. Right? I think that's could help in actually increasing not only reach but also in ads engagements. The second one that I think advertisers needs to pay attention is actually on the placement and platforms, right? Whether you actually want to put your communications in game apps as an advertising or as a built-in. The second one is actually the platforms, right? Whether it's actually YouTube as a platform or maybe other gaming event platforms for your ads. We've seen actually in YouTube, 20% of our diamond creators now are actually coming from gaming community. And diamond creators are creators that actually with 10 million subscribers. The third one that I think brands needs to do to actually embrace gaming as a true potential is actually to play deliberately on community. Gaming is actually a very tight community. There are a lot of gaming events that actually being done, whether it's actually at the big scale, at smaller scales. I think to give an examples, there are many of creators, MCNs that actually host mabar or main barangs together between the streamers and also the gamers, and they're actually doing it every week, right? So there's actually a tap opportunities or events that actually brand can actually embrace as well, right? So these are the three things I think Sudhanshu that actually brand needs to pay attention. However, at the bottom, I also would like to stress about brand safety, right? I think brand safety in this kind of environment is actually very, very critical. There are a lot of steps that actually being done by many platforms, YouTube and I think in movies included, to ensure that brands actually put their ads in a safe environment. And I think it's very important for brands to actually have that conversations with all their media providers or their media agencies too.
That's very true, and that's something quite insightful for our viewers as well. We talked about audiences and all sort of audiences at scale. You talked about creative innovations, how what sort of an opportunity gaming as a platform provides, also ability to drive community-driven initiatives. All boxes green as far as brand safety is concerned. You pretty much get all of that in mobile gaming. Now, Alvin, taking this further a bit, while we understand gaming on mobile has arrived big time. What would it take to scale adoption of ad spends on gaming ad placements? What do you think, Alvin?
Yeah, I think to be very honest, when we're thinking about scaling at this time, my point of view, it's actually quite easy to scale, right? Given the natures of the ecosystem that we have now. So it's very important for brands to actually like really understand the ecosystem, understand the game developers, understand the supply providers, supply aggregators, and also understand the platforms. Right? When you actually understand all these three elements, then I think you can actually form a right strategy to actually saturate. Now, I think the easiest one to actually saturate the gaming industry, especially for ads, is by in-game ads. Right? We have actually seen how rewards-based ads actually works in driving more engagements towards brand, because people actually wanted to get their rewards to actually continue playing, right? The second ones that actually brand can actually leverage is actually leverage the streaming platforms, right? Like I mentioned before, YouTube as a streaming platforms, where the growth on gaming vertical is actually very, very high. 20% of our diamond creators are coming from a gaming verticals right now. Now, when brands actually want to scale, I think there's a lot of merit to actually see these streaming platforms and also in-app inventory and how you can actually own it from end to end. And I think this is where programmatic solutions, for example, can actually like really cater the brand needs to actually scale gaming in a very fast way, right? And then the last one, I think, not to say the least, is actually the community events, right? I think it's very good for brand to actually create a deliberate effort, right? And I'm sure there are a lot of championship community events that actually is being available right now, and they're also available online. Mobile Legends World Cup, for example, is actually available in YouTube as well. Consumers can actually see it and watch it, and there's actually a lot of opportunity for brand to actually leverage it. I think that's my point of view, Sudhanshu, on how to scale gaming at this point in time.
Well, again, quite interesting. That now, Alvin, brings me to the last question, but definitely I think one of the more important ones, and a lot of for our viewers to take away from. If you had to sort of give top 3 tips to advertisers who are looking to tap into mobile gaming opportunity, what would be those?
Okay, I think I will start with number 1 is actually by relooking your audience target, right? I think brand needs to understand the target audience when we're talking about gaming is actually beyond younger male in urban area, right? I think you need to get your data and actually like really learns where your consumer is, and to really understand the potentials of gaming audience, right? I believe when you actually relook at your audience, then you can actually get a much bigger scale and bigger impact in totality after all. The second one is really about understanding the ecosystem to scale. There are multiple games and there are millions of gamers. And I think it's very important for brands to actually scale the effort as much as possible, because one consumers can actually play multiple games, right? When you're actually sponsoring a certain tournament, or you're actually like really putting an ad in one game, it doesn't mean you actually reach enough. I think to actually get it at scale as much as possible, I think it's very critical, because gaming is really for everybody. The third one, to be very honest, is a little bit cliche, is actually start doing, right? Everybody is actually at the nascent stage right now, I think. It's very important to actually get ahead in the learning curve. There are multiple ways for brand to actually learn. Like I mentioned, I think in-app in-app advertising is the easiest way to actually you start with. But as you actually build your data point, as you actually build your expertise on gaming, I think there are many other things that you can actually do, from sponsoring an event to actually engaging a certain gaming creators as your talents and so on, right? So, but I think the most important thing is actually start doing right now. That's it, Sudhanshu, the three things.
All right, that's great. I mean, audience targeting, I could not agree with you more. I think it's pretty evident, the data proves it, that everyone is playing mobile games. So associating mobile gaming with the cliche demographic of 16 to 18-year-old male, that's myth, nothing but a myth. So I'll conclude with that as one of the key highlight of our discussion, something that our viewers should definitely keep in mind and start doing, as you said, Alvin. Those were some amazing insights. I'm sure we are all most definitely much more richer in our thoughts and understanding of mobile gaming in terms of how advertisers are perceiving it, what are some of the challenges, and more importantly, what are the ways that they can overcome those. Thank you so much, Alvin. It was absolutely great to have you join me for this discussion, and I wish you a great day ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck for the rest of the events.
Thanks. All right, so that was some really interesting chat with Alvin, some really interesting takeaways that he mentioned. What we've done is we have listed the key takeaways out of that discussion. The number one is digital cliches. If you thought, again, we discussed some of the stats earlier and during the discussion with Alvin as well, if you thought that the mobile gamer belongs to an age 18 to 24 and his gender would be male, we're absolutely wrong. We saw the stats, there are more female gamers who are playing games on their mobile phones than male population. It's very important for you to understand your consumers there, right? Across gender, across age groups, we see mobile gaming population emerging now. So whichever your vertical is as a brand, whatever the target audience you want to reach out to, that target audience at scale you'll be found within mobile gaming population. And it's a very interesting, another very interesting aspect of this is when they're playing games, they're also receptive to the communication from the brand. So that gives another large opportunity that your audience at scale is also available. They're also a lot more receptive to receiving the communication that the brand may want to make. And of course, because it's gaming as a vertical, there are a lot of opportunities. It's a green field as well as creative executions as well. There are a lot of brands who have picked up gaming as a vertical when they're doing a lot of creative innovation done like never before. Last but definitely not the least, and actually, to be honest, very important, just hit play. What it means is just try it out. The gaming as a vertical has arrived. It's only going to increase. So if you don't have a strategy which is centered around, targeting mobile gamers, a population which is large, a population that has pretty much all the audience segment that you can think of in there, that gives you an opportunity to do a lot of innovation as far as creatives are concerned, you must have one. So that's the thought that I'll leave today's audience with. Once again, thank you so much for your time and joining us for this session. I had a great time talking about this very interesting phenomena, and I hope you had a good time too. Thank you so much again, and I hope to see you again.
A warm welcome to everybody. This will be the penultimate session of the day today. My name is Narayan Murthy Ivaturi, and I lead InMobi's performance and digital native business for Southeast Asia. I think we've been hearing all day about the disruption we have seen in the past year, how it has affected brands, marketeers, and each one of us in the region. But what does it mean in the CMO's office? How are they reimagining growth? I think this topic requires somebody special, and I have one of my dear friends, Ronan, join us. Ronan is the president and managing director of AppsFlyer across APAC, and he's been a veteran in this space, and I'm sure who else better to answer these questions. Welcome, Ronan. Welcome to the Fireside Chat.
Hi, Anam. How are you? Thank you for the kind introduction.
Awesome. Great. So let's kick things off without any further ado. So as we discussed, consumer behavior has been changing rapidly, and I'm sure all of us as individuals, as consumers, have been affected by the pandemic and how things have changed, how consumption has changed, how patterns have changed, how we are trying to adapt to a completely new way of doing things, which has also led to a lot of CMOs trying to figure out what exactly to do. Most of the times, they have to be nimble-footed and think again completely on a new strategy. So, how do you see CMO's role change, and in this ever-evolving cataclysmic change in that sense?
Look, this is, I wish there was a very to the point answer on this, but it's not, because the role, our CMO's role has changed more maybe in the past 12 months than ever in the kind of the scope of a CMO's role, where we see that the tried and tested tactics really starting to age out in this digital era, right? And it's very hard to kind of pin down what exactly is going to be the new tactic that works. So how many times over the past 12 months, for example, have we heard the word unprecedented or pivots or acceleration or digital transformation, right? These are all words that have been thrown around, but who is the one that is standing behind these words and saying we've got to take action on that as companies, and specifically in this role as a marketer? How do we take action on that? So there's constant uncertainty, right? But I think if we have to maybe boil it down to one word, I would say it's flexibility, right? That's the name of the game right now.
Yeah.
CMOs really need to exercise a lot of flexibility. They need to be able to firm up plans and budgets and really think how far that they can plot and pivot in advance, right? If you look at traditional CMOs, they make decisions based on lagging indicators.
Yeah.
But that no more is the case, because you have to look at the leading indicators to be able to understand how things are where things are headed, and you have to look to sources that maybe traditionally you didn't look at. For example, influencers. How are influencers dictating my strategy? How do I change my marketing message tomorrow, not in 6 weeks from today, right? So it's definitely very unprecedented, and they need to be able to prepare their organization that is around them for these type of disruption and for this type of acceleration that they are going through. So there's a lot of what you think, what are the contingencies being made? Like before like in pandemic marketing, there's so many like threats that a CMO can face, right? We talk about things like ad fraud and digital, like data inaccuracy and things like this that can cause chaos to how a CMO operates. So these are just some of the questions that should be asked among themselves. And I think that if we look in a much tougher marketplace, a real great CMO should be able to use a holistic blend of innovation, technology, creativity, culture to reimagine and reshape and reinvent his or her role as a CMO.
And most importantly, as I said, agility. At the speed at which you combine all of these things and take a decision or implement a decision, either execution or at strategic level. So taking it a little forward, at an individual level, for a CMO, what would be the OKRs, the skill sets? What would be impact measurement be like for a CMO in this era? I mean, I'm sure, as you said, the year is just started. I mean, 1 year has passed back, but you still don't know what is the end of it. And so in this ever-changing world, again, I mean, what would be some of those things in terms of skill sets, what adaptability, what they bring into their own self before they influence the ecosystem?
Yeah, look, I think you have to be very data driven, right? Because what's the famous saying? Someone without data is another person with an opinion, right? So really, and if we go back to what I mentioned earlier, is being able to look at the leading indicators. Where is the market going? And where are my consumers, right? And how do I use that data to help me make better decisions, right? Objectively speaking, I mean, it goes back to being nimble, being agile, being flexible. How do I really make sure that I have the skill sets within myself as well as the people around me to be able to meet the challenges that really that the modern marketer faces, right? So I think that, you know, these are just some of the things that a CMO really needs to think about in how it encompasses around their overall roles.
But do you think there is an inherent need for a certain skill sets in this ecosystem, which are like absolutely non-negotiable? Is it understanding of digital, understanding of mobile, and so on and so forth, especially from an APAC perspective?
Well, if you're talking to me, who's been a mobile dinosaur for now 15 years, right? It's definitely all digital, right? It's definitely all mobile. But I will throw in a caveat there, right? Because I think that as much as the transformation is happening into an unknown territory, I think some of the core skills that a traditional CMO has had will need to be in place as well. If you think about a mixed media modeling, right? Today, more than ever, mixed media modeling is actually going to play a much bigger part in digital strategies, right? Because we are being influenced by influencers. We see ads, we see, you know, posts in Facebook, we see, you know, emails, we see QR code. There's so much that is going around, right? Yeah. How do you build the top of funnel? And also, how do you make sure that you are ROI driven? Because really at the crux of it is, you know, you've got to have that accountability, right? For every dollar you spend, what are you bringing back in terms of return?
So the last part of the question, which is I'm very curious personally, is what would be the impact measurement? How would you measure a successful CMO strategy in this environment? I mean, mixed modeling is one of the things you said, that how effectively mixed modeling can be done. But on a larger scale, in an environment where it is so much agility is there and everything is happening at such a rapid pace, how do you measure the impact?
Look, I think you look at indicators like share of voice, right? We always need to measure our brand and how we are performing in market versus our peers or our competition, right? Yeah. This is an important measurement. I think that if you talk about being in B2B, right? You need to measure really how much qualified lead you're generating into the system, right? So that your sales team can take action on it. Yeah. If you're in a B2B, if a B2C, right? Then how you're being measured is very differently, right? Because now you're marketing to the consumer and you have a much more one-to-one feedback driven. And so, yeah, I think these are the complexities that that exist, but it's, you know, I think that it's really I would say that the KPIs can be almost as accountability to revenue as it can be to brand recognition, as it can be to customer retention, and so forth. So I don't think it's so simple. I don't think it's so simple when we look at just an overall one KPI to rule them all.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely not simple, and it's never changing, even dynamic on that side. That how do we judge the success as a metric itself is changing on a regular basis, right? That's and that brings me to the next point of the conversation. That what is the new definition of growth? a lot of categories I've seen, a lot of marketers I speak to, the definition of for growth for them is I have not degrown or I have not lost my existing footage. Because that's what pandemic has made them say, right? At least I've not lost, instead I've not gained. So what is a new definition of the whole growth part? And especially in a CMO's life, how should CMOs think for the next wave of growth? And how does next wave of growth look like?
So firstly, I think you touched on an interesting point about I've not degrown or contracted, right?
True.
But I've not grown. But as far as I know, the markets have grown everywhere, right? And so if you just want to swim in place, you do have to grow, right?
True.
And so because you are going against the tide. Look, traditionally, CMOs are probably less comfortable with driving business expansion compared to their roles like that they traditionally had of like the corporate storyteller, right?
Yeah.
Typically, their role will focus on brand development and customer engagement and communications and how to resolve like or have a less frictionless sales experience, right? But if we look at where we are today, right, there's no choice but to go outside of the comfort zone.
True.
Every skill that you've acquired, you need to take that with you, but you got to dial some of them down because you have to dial up the new skills that you as a CMO. So I think they need to think about growth, but other indicators like gross margin, right, market share, things like this too, and think how do we position marketing as a key driver of growth. I would say that every marketer, for that matter, they have to be able to embrace data and intelligence, right? Market intelligence is so key right now because it's accessible, right? If you don't leverage and harness the data that you have at your disposal, again, you're not making the best decision, right? Especially and now, like when we talk about things like budgets, and every cent is now accountable for.
True, absolutely.
Right? You can't just go and do a random TV ad and say, oh, it worked, right? It's challenging times, right? And so I think really having a good holistic view and really again back down to the ROI focus, like, am I generating a return for my dollar?
Like some of the examples we see in and around of us happening is that some of the industries, I mean, I don't want to get into a lot of industries, but some of the industries were repurposing their assets. Like we have seen, journeys to nowhere, flights to nowhere, a lot of other concepts coming up which were never unheard of. And I have seen, especially in the country I live in, Singapore, I've seen, Michelin star chefs delivering food to your home and repurposing, a lot of assets they had. So all these are, the definitions of growth, but from a very different lens. So what do you think of all these new things which are coming up from a growth standpoint and how CMOs are adapting to it?
We have to survive, don't we?
Yeah.
It's, when you're in the executive room, right, as a CMO, CEO, CGO, right, whatever your role is in the C-suite, your job is to make sure that company survives and that you weather the storm that is that you're going through. And look, there's been is so much creativity that has come out of this crisis.
Absolutely.
Right? And this is the human factor.
Yeah.
Right? To say, look, we have this asset here. How do we make the best of it? We're not gonna replicate our what our business was before this happened.
Yeah.
But we better at least make sure that we are, keeping the lights on and being able to survive as long as possible. And I think, like, you said it really well, like the flights to nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Or Michelin star chefs coming to your house and making you a meal at home.
Yeah, true.
These are the things when, you know, when tough times are calling, you know, lay down your ego and do what is necessary to survive, right? And really, it's
And when you said asset, I mean, that's the best segue to my next question. That what is the single biggest asset for a chief growth officer or a chief marketing officer of a company? And what are the challenges of scaling and adopting this asset? So what is the biggest asset they have right now?
look, I think, you know, when you talk about a CGO or a CMO, it's more than just the core marketing specialist, right? They need to have a blend of marketing, sales, product development, finance. They need to be able to achieve strategic business objectives. That is perhaps what the most important asset is when we look at this kind of fully encompassed role, right? I think like you mentioned about a CGO, like they need to break through these operational silos, right, that exist naturally in the business, and acting as a catalyst to drive cultural and organizational change, right? These are big challenges, but they should also be a visionary, right? Remember that, like, a CGO, their job is to lead the company to the next place, right? They need to be a leader, a natural leader. They need to be tasked with moving the entire business forward, and it's a heavy responsibility.
True.
And you know, I think, like, whoever that person is, you know, they got to find that right path to success. So it's not without its challenges, right? And I think that scaling and adopting different like this assets that they have into the existential dangers of, you know, what we're going through, the business kind of the business paralyzing factors, right? Yeah. Whether it is a pandemic, whether it is like the data inaccuracies, whether it is the, you know, for example, the deprecation of IDFA and things like that. We have to be able to navigate these, everyone. But this is really the CGO's got to be thinking 2 steps ahead and not just one.
Yeah, so that brings me to the, I mean, great point you mentioned about IDFA. And I want to come a little closer to our industry and talk about the same concept, right? We have seen a massive uptake in terms of gaming, a lot of utility apps, a lot of apps like the Zoom we're using right now, or any other, a lot of multiple apps which are very, very prominent now. How do you see, you know, growth marketing officers, CGOs or CMOs in our world, which we interact every day? You and me both interact with a lot of CMOs every day. How do you think they are adapting to this whole thing? I know certain categories have a huge tailwind. They don't need to do anything. They just went berserk. But that certain categories are also leading. There are certain categories are struggling in terms of how do we, because the clutter is even increasing. More and more people are tuning in. More in the clutter it is creating, because everybody trying to get my attention on my phone. So any suggestions for those CGOs and CMOs which have a huge challenge and opportunity also on their hand, which is a single big asset they have right now?
Whew, that's a big question, and and I don't know if I set myself up for it correctly. But I think that, you know, again, like we have to be able to adapt to new realities, right? And either you see this as a challenge or you see this as an opportunity. You see this as a way that, you know, maybe the way I was leveraging data or making decisions was too much information sometimes. Maybe I need to be able to do more with less, right, that I have. And this is, you know, about, and whether it's a budget constraint or access to data constraint, right?
True.
We need to adapt, right? And you know, the again, going back to the IDFA, it's no different, right? How do you turn what is happening in the industry into an opportunity for yourself as a growth officer? right?
Yeah.
How do you find the new way to market in this in mobile and market in the app ecosystem with a new constraint?
True.
So yeah. I think it's look, it'll be maybe we need to schedule a separate webinar for that.
That's a long topic. Yeah, we can go
Yes,
on further.
absolutely.
So that brings me to the last question. So what are the 3 top tips you have for marketers listening in today, how they should approach the growth marketing for today, tomorrow, the time to come? So what are your 3 wizard tips?
The wizard tips. Where's my wizard hat? Maybe I can put it on the Zoom filter. Look, I think you need to be committed to protecting your business in the same way that you're committed to growing it, right? Data is your most valuable asset, right? And you should guard it. It's unfathomable that you don't guard your data. And there's ways to be exposed to, fraud is a factor. Dealing with platforms that are biased per se, or don't really, the loss of the independence in this kind of marketing measurement world. I think it's these are risks, right? And data as the new oil is already 10 years old analogy, right?
Too many times now.
Too many times, but it's the truth.
Yeah,
it's so valuable, right? I think you also have to harness technology, right? True. I think this is tech has become so central to business success, right? We look at today's growth stack compared to 10 years ago. We think 10 years ago, we think, oh, wow, look what we have. And today we think, oh my God, what else do we need, right? As the tech stack becomes way more complicated. We need to work in partnership with our technology teams, with analysts. We need to work close with app developers. There's tons of tools out there and tons of partners to work with, including, companies like InMobi, which it's a stalwart in this industry. Just, and this is what companies really need to see is which companies were there, are here, and are going to be there tomorrow. And you need to understand the limitations of technology, right? Make smart investments and be able to grow these opportunities with your business. And lastly, I would say you need to communicate your vision, right? Your C-suite needs to hear it, right? They need to hear what direction you're going and buy into your visionary growth, because like I mentioned, like you're 2 steps ahead, but it's still so hard to take the 1 step forward already. So you really need to be a great communicator in that respect.
Oh, absolutely. So in all summary, I mean, if I can just pick up the keywords from your sense, agility is the most important. Knowing your assets is more important than utilizing effects. It's a lot of times knowing what are our assets and utilizing them are 2 different things. So I think knowing, understanding, protecting what our assets are, especially data, and choosing the right technology partners, investing in the right technology. Awesome. Yeah, I think that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Ronan. Thank you so much for taking time, and absolutely always been wonderful talking to you, and today is no different. Absolutely wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom and your guidance to a lot of CMOs who are hearing this conversation. I'm sure they'll reach out to you in person and probably get more tips over a cup of coffee, I guess. Thank you, audience, for tuning in and listening to us. And at InMobi, we are happy to bring in more sessions like this in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a wonderful session, NM, and really a pleasure, really pleasure to connect with you like this. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thanks, Narayan and Ronan, for that insightful session on how the role of the CMO and growth is being redefined in 2021. And we've come to a close of the inaugural summit on building resilient brands by InMobi, where we were discussing and delving deep into the topic thriving in the era of mobile. But as we draw to a close, I wanted to leave you guys with a couple of most important takeaways that you guys can take back as key actionables for your brand. Now, one of the most important topics today has been about driving growth through mobile marketing maturity, but that has some key pillars to it and four important pieces that every brand needs to pay attention to. The first bit is about how to leverage mobile first consumer intelligence. Second bit is playing to the gallery with mobile video. And once you basically are looking at, leveraging a lot of mobile first consumer intelligence, using mobile video, you need to use the right kind of channels, which is programmatic, and right kind of automation to drive efficiencies, and ultimately aim to drive personalization using data, measurement, and automation. Now, when we dive deep into each of these, there are 2 or 3 key actionables that each brand can look into. On leveraging mobile first consumer intelligence, one of the most important pieces is that today, when it comes to driving insights to action, a lot of brands are limited by the traditional methodologies that they follow for research. What brands need to do, most importantly in 2021, is to move beyond conventional research methodologies by leveraging the always-on device of the connected consumer, which is mobile. And that will help you make sure that you are keeping a tab on every moment, every stage of the consumer life cycle, and understand their changing brand preferences, shopping preferences, media behavior in a much better fashion. However, what is most critical when you're using mobile first consumer intelligence is to make sure that you're enhancing your first party data through that. But that cannot happen without making sure that you're establishing data value exchange with consumers. We've seen that consumers are increasingly likely to share more and more of their data if they see true value from a brand. Now, be it traditional or digital first, it does not matter. You need to make sure that you're using the always-on device, mobile, to gather insights and bridge the online and offline actions of consumers to therefore make sure that you're having all data with you and building a 360-degree view of the consumer. Last year, we've seen, be it mobile, be it any other device, and be it any kind of environment, gaming, OTT, short form video, social media, you name it, and you know that mobile video is basically the way consumers are learning from, and they are using video to basically learn the latest news, educate themselves about cooking, and figuring out how to connect with their near and dear ones. Now, as you understand the video phenomenon, the most important approach and shift that you need to make is to invest in mobile video as mainstream and not innovation. But while you do so and make sure that you are increasingly looking at mobile video in your media mix, you need to make sure that you are making a fundamental shift of delivering a mobile first video experience, which is buffer free using mobile first technology. This means a simple activation of the latest ad serving templates that are recommended by the Interactive Advertising Bureau. And ultimately, as you invest in mobile video more and more, you also need to make sure that you're measuring it by leveraging the Mobile Rating Council's accredited viewability partners to make sure that you also have the most common metrics and the most accessible metrics for driving efficacy and ROI through mobile video. Now, as you start thinking about driving a lot of mobile first consumer intelligence access and driving a lot of mobile video engagement with your consumers, what you need to make sure is that you're driving a lot of efficiencies across the board by adopting in-app programmatic. Now, one of the first steps in that is to invest in programmatic technologies such as demand-side platforms, which help you manage targeting, creative, measurement, and a lot more in one single place. That means working with your DSPs and your partners across the supply chain to ensure that you're looking at metrics such as brand safety, viewability, and also enabling supply path optimization across. Ultimately, with the deprecation of the cookie by Google, you will see that in-app is the way to go. And therefore, you need to prepare yourself fundamentally from a technology standpoint to make sure that you're accessing the connected consumer where they are. Now, ultimately, as we have discussed a lot about leveraging programmatic technology to build and enrich your consumer intelligence and insights, and also engage your consumers via mobile video and other mobile first formats, what is also important is that ultimately you're driving personalization using data, measurement, and automation. You are looking at basically marrying all your first party data, second party data, and third party data, and enabling a lot of automation on top of that, so that you're able to basically make sure that you're enabling a seamless consumer journey and experience across their buying and brand life cycle. And most importantly, what you need to do is that make sure that you're also measuring and attributing the right kind of moments that are driving ROI and bang for the buck for you. Our annual mobile marketing handbook, which we are releasing for the second time in a year, will be available for all of you to access in the chat as well as in your email. We'll also make sure that the recording of these sessions that all of you have been listening to today will be made available on demand so that you can access and review at your own comfort. Thanks a lot for taking time out and joining in for the inaugural Building Resilient Brands Summit being hosted by InMobi. Looking forward to seeing you at other events, hopefully in person and not virtually. Take care, guys. Thank you.